I just realized I'm wearing quite literally the exact same thing that I wore in the intro in the last show that I did with you. So I'm a man of simple style. Hi everybody, welcome into the Black and Gold Breakdown. Jerry Bailey with you, as always, joined by my good friend from Penn Live, Nick Faribaugh. Hello, fella. How are you?
We're doing well. We're doing well, man. How are you doing?
Doing well too. Yeah, each of us kind of took a little career path turn where we're at new places now, and it was just nice to the progression. It's always good to keep climbing, and very happy for you and your new venture. And the last week has been new for me too. So it's a week of change, but welcome change.
Yeah, man. Happy for you, of course. It's been a very big change for me, but Penn Live it's awesome. So I'm loving it over there, man. Hope you're doing the same.
I am. Shout out to everybody at the Sporting News. Go read my shameless plug real quick. Go and read my in-depth piece on the Buffalo Bills and Joe Brady's philosophy and how he changed them on the fly last year. One of the more in-depth pieces I've done. I think it's one of the better things I've done. Very proud of it. So please go and read it over on the Sporting News. And then in the coming days, I'm going to be releasing a piece on how the Chiefs can become the greatest dynasty in the history of Western civilization. So that'll be fun too. Read everything on the Sporting News. But today, on the Steelers side of things, talking about running backs. We talked about quarterbacks on Wednesday with our buddy Aaron Becker. That was a very fun time. So if you haven't seen that yet, go and watch that after the fact. Running backs. We kind of know who the two main focal points are going to be. It's going to be the Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren show. You look at the numbers that each of them put up last year. Najee going over the 1,000-yard mark again. Najee or Jaylen Warren, more of the dual threat type running back, more of a receiving threat out of the backfield. I'm intrigued to see how the splits are going to look this year as compared to last year. Obviously, 2023 was a big jump for Jaylen Warren from 2022. I wouldn't be surprised if we keep seeing that progression from him, especially because it seems that he is the more long-term plan at running back for the Steelers. But overall, just give me your overall thoughts on those two going into this season and what the carry numbers could look like and what the usage could look like between Najee and Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, I mean both should have pretty big years, I think, for a few reasons. One, I think Arthur Smith's offense is obviously going to lend itself to them having a lot of ground and pound, having a lot of carries themselves, so they're going to get the rock, man. Like the opportunities are going to be there, probably even more so than last year. More than that, though, I think they're going to have a better O line. Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu. So you're going to have an athletic offensive line. You should have probably the best offensive line Najee Harris has had in his career, which I think is intriguing to see. I still think, we'll get into this a little bit. I still think he's being a bit undervalued. I understand the efficiency numbers aren't great, but we're talking about a guy that is super durable. And I think one thing that gets lost with Najee Harris is the longer the season goes on, the better he gets, which is something that is noticeable. He's a guy that's a classic bell cow build. I think he's a better receiver than the Steelers use him as. We saw what he did his rookie season. I think they should get back to that. Jaylen Warren is just an explosive spark plug too. I think that's the big thing. His instant acceleration, his instant explosiveness in and out of cuts, special stuff. You look at his per touch numbers last year on an efficiency basis. He's near the tops of the league. It's really him and Devon Achan on a ton of those metrics. Forced missed tackles. He truly did. I don't think it's hyperbole. He had one of the most impressive tackle breaking seasons on a per touch basis in recent memory. I mean, it was really impressive to see what Jaylen Warren did last year. So, you're looking at two guys that should have really big years, as far as I'm concerned, in this offense. And you look at what Warren did and how efficient and explosive and what the team did last year with him in, man, this is probably going to be more 50-50 than it was last year. Najee probably had a 60-40 his direction last year. This year, I think Arthur Smith is a guy that kind of rides the hot hand. If there's not an obvious A1, and I don't think there's an obvious A1 here,
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think Jaylen Warren's going to necessarily overtake Najee Harris. I think that is kind of jumping the gun a little bit. I still think Najee Harris is going to have a huge role in this offense, and so I'm thinking 55-45 in favor of Najee, or really kind of right on the line of 50-50. I do expect this to be pretty split right down the middle.
Yeah, and when it comes to these two, I tend to lean more toward the Jaylen Warren side of things. And I've said it a lot this offseason. It's not to be a bang against Najee or anything like that. It's just, yes, he's had the 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to begin his career and everything like that, behind mostly mid offensive lines, to put it nicely. But Jaylen Warren has also had those same offensive lines, and last year I think he showed an element of explosiveness that Najee Harris just doesn't have. And we saw it in the preseason game against Buffalo, and then saw it against the Cleveland Browns when he broke things open for the longer touchdown run. So I think that there is a spark plug element that Warren has that Harris does not. And again, that's not a knock against Najee Harris. It's just not who he is as a running back. But if I had to take one of them right now as who I think is the better back, I would probably pick Jaylen Warren. I know you said that Najee Harris is undervalued. I think that Jaylen Warren might be a little bit undervalued.
They both probably already would agree. I do think last year, for example, I think they went away from Warren at times where they probably shouldn't have. Like that Cleveland Browns game, he probably should have gotten more touches in that game. But I also think, people really harp on a lot of Najee Harris's down performances, but don't harp as much on Jaylen Warren's. That's just within the Steelers fan base. Like Jaylen Warren has had games that he does not look great. He
Sure.
does not, look like a running back one. Najee Harris has had the same happen to him. But they really work off each other super well for the reasons you described. When you have a guy that's that big, like Najee Harris, always falls forward, grinds out extra yards, even if he doesn't have explosiveness. That's a guy that when you compare him with a guy that's that explosive and still super physical, like Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris are both super physical runners that really wear down defenses in a really old school way, right? Like, dude, there is something to that over the course of the season where when you face guys like Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren and it's week 15 and you're just getting smacked in the face 30, 35 times. Like there's something to it. And again, this is, I think, part of the reason why Najee Harris over a season ends up getting better, just because he's super durable. That's a skill, man. Like the fact that both these guys have been very durable over the first 3 or 2 years of their careers is a real benefit to the Steelers. They have not missed Warren or Harris really at all throughout most of their time in the NFL. Jaylen Warren missed a little bit of time with that hamstring injury his rookie year, but outside of that, nothing. Najee Harris, it's an impressive stat. I know 1,000 yards isn't this whole thing anymore now that there's 17 games in the NFL. But there is one running back in the NFL that has 1,000 yards over the last 3 seasons, and it is Najee Harris. He's a bastion of durability. You know what you're going to get in him. You're going to get a guy that's a leader and shows up every day, tries hard, says the hard things to the locker room. So I do think Najee Harris is a little undervalued. He's not valued in traditional metrics. He's not valued in efficiency metrics. And so it becomes really easy, I think, for someone from the outside that maybe doesn't watch Najee Harris all the time to say this is a mediocre to bad running back. But I think there's so much more context with Najee Harris. I understand, anyone that prefers Jaylen Warren. I think I can make a real good argument. I think I probably even feel that way, to be quite honest with you. I think Jaylen Warren's probably better, at least in his role he is. But I also think, like, you have to understand, like, Najee Harris is a pretty valuable piece in this running back market, just because what's the knock against all these running backs? They're getting hurt all the time. Well, Najee doesn't. So, and he gets better as the season goes on. And I'm interested to see him, with this new offensive line he's going to have. I think that's going to really help him. When you don't have great short area burst and acceleration like Najee Harris, having that O-line man in place, it really is an important factor. So if they can get a really solid, blocking offensive line like they did in the second half last year, I think you can see him really tick up in the efficiency metrics. If he can even get up to, what he was, 4.1 yards per carry last year, I think.
Yeah.
That was the most efficient of his career. I think his rushing
It
yards.
was the first year that he had over 4 yards a carry.
Right. He had this most efficient year last year of his career in yards per carry, rushing yards over expectation per carry. All of those were, highs. He has most efficient tackle breaking season 2 on a per touch basis. So, he's coming off his most efficient season. So there is something to that, I think where maybe we can see a more efficient Najee. I'm not thinking, he's going to have 5 yards per carry, but can we see 4.6? I think, something like that is really important. And I do think, that they've really underutilized his receiving chops. I understand, Jaylen Warren's the third down back, and that naturally gets him more opportunities in that area. But Najee Harris is a gifted wide receiver. When he goes outside and can run wheel routes, Texas routes, catch balls and get them out in space against corners and safeties, and he breaks those tackles almost every time. So I would really like to see that be incorporated in this offense too.
Get to a few comments real quick. Hello, Omar's Burner. Great YouTube name, by the way, with the Brandon Ayuk Abbey. Is tremendous stuff. So thanks for tuning in. And then our
Gotta love it. This is on the fly journalism, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh wow,
bro! When I tell you, let me do this real quick. When I tell you, for some reason, this is like the third time this has happened in like the past, I don't know how long, like maybe like 2 months. Don't know why. It keeps happening though. It's really bothering me, and I don't know how to make it stop. So if the good people at StreamYard want to help me figure out why this keeps happening, I would love you very, very much so for it. It appears that we're getting back in now. So if I hit refresh here, then we're going to hop back on into the computer side of the world. But StreamYard, figure your shit out. God damn it. All right. Hopping back in on the other side of things. Jesus Lord.
There we go. Goodness gracious. I hate that. As I'm echoing. That was atrocious. Shout out to the boy Derek Bell, though, for hopping on and watching the stream at the worst possible time. Goodness gracious, I hate that. All right. So we were talking about the efficiency and whatnot and getting better as the season goes. I think the Seattle game was a pretty good benchmark for that, where both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren just pounded the hell out of the Seahawks, and that opened up opportunities in the passing game and really helped Mason Rudolph and George Pickens thrive. So games like that are a really good example of durability being a really big thing for the Steelers. And you look at the splits last year in terms of the rate at which teams ran. The Steelers ran at 43% of the time. The Falcons were right ahead of them at 44%. So I think we're still going to see roughly the same amount of rushing attempts per game, maybe a slight uptick in the offense. You had asked Arthur Smith right after the draft if you plan on throwing a few different looks into the running game, specifically more like gap style runs, because of the fact that they have a lot of offensive linemen that can get into space. I will be intrigued to see how much of that they incorporate into the run game, being that Arthur Smith is more of an outside zone type of guy.
It was interesting. Zach Frazier said at minicamp they hadn't installed any yet. So pretty butter stuff, in the Arthur Smith offense. What you think of outside zone, mid zone, duo, inside zone, stuff like that. It seems like they're, really doing a lot of that right now, rather than say power, counter, trap, crunch, whatever it might be, all those different concepts. So I'm interested to see if they do that. I think that's something to look at. Here's the interesting thing, counterintuitively, you would look at these two running backs, Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, and think Jaylen Warren's a better outside zone runner. just because his explosiveness is one cut ability. Like the efficiency metrics on those, though, are the opposite. Najee Harris is the more efficient outside zone runner, which is interesting. So I'm interested to see how Warren kind of fits into this because, again, like outside zone was his least efficient run last year. So I'm just interested to see how Jaylen Warren kind of takes on the new challenge of outside zone because those numbers are really kind of it's counterintuitive to what you would think of these two. Najee Harris can really run any type of scheme. I think he's his best downhill. I think we saw that last year when
Absolutely.
he got behind like Broderick Jones pulling into gaps and could just get downhill and hit a poor safety and just go. I thought we really saw that, but you can do that with outside zone too. If you block it up correctly, Najee Harris can, run, cut right behind the B gap, C gap, and really get up and, get 6-7 yards, break a tackle and take it 15-20. I think that's where Najee Harris's real efficiency kind of burst in that second half last year, Jarrett, was he wasn't taking it 50 yards, but he was getting a lot of, 15, 20, 25, where he was – you remember that Seattle game where he just dragged a dude like 10 yards with him? Like, that's what he can do when he gets into space.
Or even the Cincinnati game, it wasn't even in space. He's in a dog pile after 4 yards and somehow comes out the other side of it and gets a big gain. Like stuff like that he's very good at doing. It's valuable to what the Steelers do, especially, to the late portions of the year.
Yeah, I agree. And, here's the thing. I look at, Najee Harris, and when you actually look at the efficiency on gap runs, he legitimately ranked out in terms of efficiency as the second out of the guys that qualified when you filter it for gap runs of 75 or more. He's the second worst in the NFL in terms of efficiency on, which is weird, and I don't know how they were charted necessarily, but he's a legitimately above average outside zone runner. So I think he's going to fit really well. I think people are really underestimating how good Najee Harris is going to fit. Jaylen Warren, on the other hand, I think should fit in well, but we'll see.
I'm also curious to see how much they use Cordero Patterson in the offense. I know a lot of people have been kind of curious about that since they made the signing. I've kind of leaned towards he'll be more so just the return specialist type of guy who might get the occasional run or offensive snap. I don't think he's going to be a huge part of what they do offensively, though.
Yeah, he's going to be interesting. Like, I'm interested to see where Cordero Patterson slots in. I think they're going to run a lot of two running back stuff. I think that's something we haven't mentioned yet. I think we could see Najee and Warren on the field at the same time together.
Especially, not to interrupt you, but especially on like early downs last year, the Falcons led the NFL in 22 personnel on first downs. So we could see a lot of that type of stuff where we didn't see the Steelers run any 22 or 20. Yeah. Very rare that we saw anything like that.
Right. And Patterson can work as like a slot receiver out of that. Yeah. And do different things. So he'll probably factor into that. I'm sure he'll get some carries. I don't expect him to have a ton of carries, but I think he'll be used as an interesting kind of switch up. So let me read you some numbers here.
Okay.
From Fantasy Points on zone runs, just zone concepts. Najee Harris, 4.1 yards per carry. Jaylen Warren's 3.9.
Okay.
When you get to outside zone, Najee Harris jumps up to 5.2.
Wow.
Which is interesting. And Jaylen Warren's around that 3.9. I think he's 3.93. On the man runs, though, that's counter whatever you want with the pulling guards. Najee Harris, 3.67 yards per carry. Jaylen Warren, 6.7.
Oh, my goodness.
Crazy. Jaylen Warren is a monster with the pulling stuff, but it is only one season. And so I think I'm interested to see it, especially because that's all they've been working on this offseason. And Jaylen Warren knew that that's what they were going to be doing, a lot of outside zones. So, that's going to be it might be, I don't know if it's a vision point thing, if It's just a difference of blocking that maybe he got. Maybe Najee Harris just ended up falling forward a lot because he's a big dude in space. It gets smaller guys.
Yeah.
So we'll see kind of what it was, but I think Jaylen Warren has a real chance to maybe take a leap there just because, he's probably been training on outside zone all season and all off season. So I'm interested to see what happens there. These should be two really good guys. And we're talking about that 22 personnel. They can do different things. They could do jet sweeps if you want that. They can do, different formations with Russell Wilson. And if Justin Fields factors into this, that could be really dangerous on the ground. So they can do a ton of different stuff to really pop this running back room. And they need to lead on this running back room. They got 3 legitimate guys in the room that should have some role on offense. Cordarrelle Patterson should factor into this somehow. You can get him in space on manufactured screens. He can break tackles still. He's got great vision. So you can use a lot of different things there. So these running backs should be leaned upon, especially if they don't add a wide receiver. These running backs are going to be very important to the success of this offense.
Absolutely. How many running backs are we going to see them carry? Are we going to see more than 3? Is there going to be, maybe one of these 4th guys that sneaks in, maybe like a Michael P. Ryan, Dajan Edwards, Jonathan Ward, Aaron Shamplin? Like, there's a lot of guys that we saw in throughout OTAs and minicamp. Are we going to see any of them sneak onto the roster in some way, shape, or form?
My feeling is probably still 3. I think it's possible they keep 4 because of the volume of running they're going to do. Mm-hmm. I just go through the roster and where is the 4th running back coming from? That's what I continue to ask myself. So 3 quarterbacks are probably being kept on the roster. We probably can expect Wilson, Fields, and Allen. Probably 5 receivers. I don't really expect them to keep 6.
I don't either.
I think it's going to be 5. I think they're going to keep 4 tight ends this year. They're so deep in that room. They have 5 legitimate NFL tight ends. So I think they're going to keep 4. Probably 9 offensive linemen, I would say. 7 defensive linemen, I would probably say 2. You could keep only 4 inside linebackers. You're probably keeping 5. The reason being, I think you want Mark Robinson's special teams help.
Yeah. And if somebody gets hurt like they dealt with last year, you want to be able to have that extra, those extra pieces.
Right. So I wouldn't be shocked at that. Outside linebacker, probably 4, maybe 5. You could switch out that room, the inside linebacker room. And then, DB, man, I mean, that's just a clog of dudes in DB. You're probably keeping, when Cam Sutton ends up back after the bye week, you're probably going to have 2 slot corners on the roster. And you're probably going to have, Dante Jackson, Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice, and Darius Rush all on the team. So you're probably going to keep 6 corners. 4 safeties. I mean, you look at KZ, Elliott, and Fitzpatrick are roster locks. Honestly, Killebrew kind of is too.
Yeah.
Probably want to keep Ryan Watts. I mean, it's just gonna be tough. And then obviously you have your 3 specials. It's just hard to find the 4th running back spot to me. I'd rather keep the extra defensive back. I'd rather keep the extra inside linebacker because I do think that these new kickoff rules, man. I think it's gonna be a real factor in these games.
For sure.
I think there's gonna be fireworks on these things. So I think you need to take it very seriously. Who you're keeping where. So I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe 8. We only keep 8 offensive linemen. Maybe it could be, but the 4th running back, I think they've done it before. I just have a hard time seeing it. Especially when you take into consideration, last year they tinkered with the idea of Connor Hayward back there. He can work as a fullback, tight end type, the Swiss Army knife. So, I mean, he could basically be your 4 kind of type if you really wanted him to. I'd like the guys they have in the room. I think they have a lot of veteran competition, with P. Ryan, Michael P. Ryan, Jonathan Ward. You look at Dajan Edwards, and then you look at Aaron Shamplin. I think they have some really intriguing players there. I think, last year they only kept 1 on the practice squad. Maybe you just keep 2 on the practice squad this year.
Yeah. It'll be intriguing. Looking forward to seeing these guys work in Latrobe and during preseason. Over under, 1.5, 1.5 kickoff return touchdowns for Cordero Patterson this year. I feel like one feels. I'd feel confident saying he gets at least one.
Yeah, one seems about right to me.
When's the last time they had a kickoff return touchdown? I'm trying to think back, like just kickoff return, not punt returns. They've had a few punt returns in recent memory, especially with AB.
It was Juju, I think, maybe.
On a kickoff return? Oh, maybe against Cleveland.
Yeah. Juju. Yeah. I was thinking back, and I was like, are we going all the way back to like Stephon Logan?
Aaron Rossum had one against the 49ers in 2007, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think.
Yeah, the last one was Juju Smith-Schuster.
It was the last game of the regular season against, well, what ended up being the winless Browns, right? Because that was the year they went 0-16. Yeah, what Landry Jones started that game. Oh, yeah. Great memories. Yeah, there hasn't been too many over the last, 2 decades or so. I think there's only been a small handful. So, again, somebody said there was one against the Titans years ago. Oh, AB had one against the Titans. Yeah. It was on like a reverse type situation, right?
Yeah. Then you had the 49ers, which was Allen Rossum.
Yep.
And then then you have to go back to 2002 when they defeated the Bengals 34-7 when you had Antoine Randall take back. So
Antoine Randall, the star of receiver, Antoine Randall, talking to Amon-Ra St. Brown on the sidelines there.
And then Will Blackwell in 2000. The Steelers have only had 5 kickoff return touchdowns this century.
I feel like that's low.
I'm not saying that's the worst in the NFL, but I'm going to have to say that has to contend for the worst since 2000. I
was going to say, that feels pretty low.
It does.
Feels pretty low.
We're not talking about a short sample size. Like, I'm not saying everybody.
That's what, 24 years? Like, it's pretty good sample size.
Like, I'm sure, like, the Vikings are up there because of Cordero when he was with them.
The Bears are obviously going to be up there.
I'm sure the Browns are up there because of Devin Hester. I'm sure the Chiefs are up there maybe because of Dante Hall. Like, you think of great returners in 2000.
Yeah.
But only 5. That feels low. It
does feel very low. Overall production from top 2 running backs, what, just rough estimates in your head, what do you think that these numbers will look like?
I do think Najee will get over 1,000 again, probably, as long as he stays healthy. We're probably looking at like 1-1 there, 1,100 probably, something around there. I think Jaylen Warren, though, can get 800 or so in there and probably a bit more receiving. So yeah. I think you're going to see them really robust production from this room because I just think they're going to be leaned upon, man, so much.
I would agree with that. And I think that the absolute 100 billion% peak of this offense would be something similar to like what the Lions did last year, where they had damn near two 1,000-yard backs. I think Jahmyr Gibbs was like 57 yards away from being a 1,000-yard rusher. David Montgomery eclipsed that mark, and they still had Goff throw for 4,600 yards. So I think that's the absolute peak of what the offense can be, and what I think they're going to try to somewhat be, especially if the play action pass is utilizing, whether it be Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson on these in-breaker type routes. But I think that's kind of maybe the direction that they would like to go in terms of the run game is, have a Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs type situation with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, they should have legitimate production out of these two. I think the Lions, that is the peak. Everything has to fire, though, for that. They need a more robust passing game than I think they'll have. I really think, the passing game is going to be very much, run the ball, play action, deep shots. Like, that's what's probably going to be. George Pickens, by the way, is going to have an insane yards per reception, probably.
Yeah. Last year's 18-1.
Dude, he might get 19. I mean,
good.
It's not crazy to think, he ends up having just this profile of deep targets.
Yeah.
It really isn't. Yeah, he had 63 for 140 last year. I mean, would anybody be shocked if he had 70 for 1,250? Wouldn't be that surprising to me. I think he can do it. I think he can.
Looking at his,
I do think he's that good. So that could be crazy, but I don't. I don't know if they're going to be. I think they're going to be a little too rusty to start the year.
Hmm.
When I mean that, like the O line specifically, the one thing about the Lions is their O line is just there. Like they had their guys there. They have been there before, so there wasn't a ton of transition. Like the Steelers are going to have transition on that O line, regardless if Fautanu and Frazier start. So I don't know if
Sure.
they're going to hit the ground running like the Lions can, but yeah, that's probably the ceiling. I think more realistic would probably be the numbers I threw out, where you have kind of that good balance, and they'll be a really good running team. I think they're going to be a really, really good rushing team. I'm interested to see how they play off the passing game, because if the passing game falters, teams are just going to start stacking the box on them. But that could the thing is, they're going to have to play too high, because Russ, otherwise against single high, is going to be able to uncork his deep balls. And I mean,
And
that's a good conundrum to have when you're the Steelers. That they can play off each other pretty well, because if they're in too high, the run game should be better. Then if you force them into one high, theoretically, the deep balls to Pickens or whoever else, Calvin Austin will theoretically open up.
And if you want to see some numbers on Russell Wilson real quick, especially against the deep ball, there you go. 4th in completions last year, 25 more air yards. 3rd in yards on passes of 25 or more air yards. 4th in touchdowns. 7th in passer rating and 20 more air yards. Like, dude, if there's one thing you could say about Russell Wilson last year, it's that he could still chuck it. And in an offense that didn't necessarily call for him to do so, he was still being able to do that. So
he chucks it or he checks it down. That's literally what it was last year for him. The middle of the field, man, just it's a barren desert on his map. But they need him to have that deep ball, man. And listen, we were there in the spring, man.
Yeah,
like he's got it still. So we'll see how it works off it. I expect that to be the way the simplest terms of the formula are going to be. All right, teams are probably going to play it too high because they don't want to allow explosive plays with Russell Wilson. Okay, makes sense. Well, the Steelers are going to try and run the football really well. And this is why the Marshawn Lynch pairing always worked extremely well with Russell Wilson, was because teams would try and play too high to take away Russ's deep ball. They would have to roll down the extra guy, and then they would hit him over the top. That's what always happened, or Russ just made magic happen outside of structure. But that was the basics of that offense. It's what always worked. So they're really going back to the basics of what made Russell Wilson work. And if Russell Wilson could be a game manager that uncorks explosive plays every now and then, I think they could be solid as long as this rushing game remains efficient. I think that's going to be the key. This running game, they can't get into 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12. So that's going to be real bad if they get to those spots.
Do you think we see Fields at any point this season as a starter?
Probably. I expect it. Russ, if not, Russ maybe doesn't get benched. He has gotten hurt a decent bit in recent years. He's talked about how he played through a really bad lat injury in 22.
Mm-hmm.
He had that hand injury before. Like, he's a guy that has been more banged up in recent years. So if for nothing else, I think there's a real good chance Fields just ends up starting because Russ gets banged up. And again, I think this team's going to have some trouble pass protecting too this year. I do. Even with the new guys, I just think they're a little raw in that area across a few points. And Russell Wilson runs into sacks. We know he's going to run into sacks. He does it. It's just part of who he is. So you naturally run up the injury risk there when that happens. So I think Fields probably does end up starting at some point.
All right. Let's run through it real quick. Record-wise, because we're getting to that point where it's prediction season. 10-7 last year. What's the record this year for you?
I go the same. I think 10-7 is very realistic for them. Listen, I know that they upgrade across the board, really. I mean, the team looks better from a number of different angles. They're better linebacking room, better secondary. The O-line should be better. Wide receiver room should be probably taking a step back, but they're better at offensive coordinator. They're better quarterback. So on paper, this is a better roster than it was when they left Buffalo. I think that is very true. They're better. Heck, they're even better punter if you really want to go that far.
Shout
And
out
like, that
to
could
Indy.
actually matter. I mean, it could matter. Their punting situation really put the defense in some really bad spots last year.
Wesley Harvin was quite bad. Yes.
Yes. Dude, the defense got saddled with some absolute between the offense's ineptitude and the bad punting. The Steelers defense got saddled with some absolutely awful
Dude,
situations.
if you looked at like their average yards per drive, the average plays per drive, like yeah, there wasn't a lot of turnovers, but when you're constantly only going, 3-4 plays before you're giving the ball back, I mean that practically those turnover numbers more than make up for themselves at that point.
Right, and the Steelers defense was on the field a lot, so they played
Yeah.
a lot of plays. They allowed, they did. It was a lot of bend don't break at times last year, but they created a lot of turnovers, and they were shortchanged a lot of the year. They were missing Cam Hayward, they were missing Minka Fitzpatrick. Heck, they didn't even have healthy linebackers for the entire second half of the season.
Called Miles Jack out of retirement to come fill some voids.
Michael Walker. I mean, dude,
Ugh.
it was crazy the guys they were putting out there. So
Did Blake Martinez ever play a game? I can't recall seeing him. He might have though.
who?
Didn't they sign? Was it Blake Martinez they signed at some point last season?
Yeah, he played a little bit, I believe. One of the late season games. But yeah, like they really just they were banged up on that side of the ball. They played a lot, and the offense didn't help much till later in the year. And then you kind of saw eventually the defense start to put things a little bit together. At least you saw the strengths of it, right? The pass rush looked a little bit more energized. Highsmith and Watt were really eating over those last 3 games. And then obviously Watt got hurt, which was another banged up. They get Minka Fitzpatrick back, and then they miss TJ Watt against Buffalo.
Right.
And Buffalo just exposed the weaknesses in the secondary and linebacker. Well, those weaknesses really aren't as prominent anymore. They have speed in Dante Jackson. Even if you don't think Dante Jackson's this great corner, he's definitely better than Levi Wallace and Patrick Peters.
Yeah.
It's true. He's better than those guys. Their safety room is better. Deshaun Elliott's going to be a really nice addition for them. Patrick Queen's going to allow them to do a ton of different things there too, and they're going to move Minka Fitzpatrick back to his natural single high spot full time, which is again that's going to be another big boost for them. So this is a team that is going to be better defensively. They're going to be better in terms of personnel at most offensive positions outside of wide receiver. But they're deeper at wide receiver too. I think that's the interesting thing. If they can add another just legit 2 or 3 to this wide receiver room where you don't feel as dire, that room is deeper than it was last year. Van Jefferson is better than any depth wide receiver they had last year. There's no question to me about that. I just don't feel comfortable with having Van Jefferson as your wide receiver 2. I think right now he is the favorite to be wide receiver 2. I think the best, let's hope. I think if you're a Steelers fan, you're looking at this room, man. You're hoping Calvin Austin really that spring that we saw Calvin Austin has carries over. He was incredible in the spring. I mean, that is not a hyperbole. He cooked everybody he went up against. It didn't matter if it was Joey Porter Jr., Minka Fitzpatrick, whoever they put in front of him, he won. So if you want that to continue, you need that to happen. But I think 10-7 is very realistic for them. They've shown an aptitude to win close games. They should be able to game manage effectively. The defense should be better theoretically. And so theoretically, man, I think the schedule on paper is tougher. I don't even think the teams are necessarily tougher. I think, you actually compare the teams last year to the teams that they have this year. I don't think it's appreciably 100% worse. I just think the layout of the schedule really hurts them in the second half. I do think that layout is brutal, but I think 10-7 is a very fair record for them. And they're built to win in the North, man. And that's something. When you are in the toughest division in football, he went 5-1 last year. And I know you had some luck because you faced Jake Browning twice. And
sure,
the Ravens decided to drop the ball all over the field and you face the backups. I understand there's some asterisks there, but then you look back to 2020, man, they're the best record against the North. So they're built to win in the North too. So they're optimized to go 10-7. I think that's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10, 11 wins is certainly possible. I think you start really, I've seen a lot of people like, oh, 12-5. That's where I started to push back a little bit. I think 10, 11 is pretty realistic. I don't feel comfortable giving any team like 12, 13 wins unless you got one of these like elite quarterbacks. But I think 10 and 7, 11 and 6 is probably right in that sweet spot. I think 9 wins is their floor, in my opinion, just because of what they did last year with how bad they were, especially at quarterback. So I'd probably put them around 10 and 7, 11 and 6. And the stuff with the division, man, like, I think it's hilarious that the NFL is pretending that they didn't do that on purpose and then gave them Hard Knocks. Like, that's so cute. And the other thing is that, when you're playing these teams in November, December, that's going to be a little bit easier for you when you face a team like Cincinnati. If they can't throw the ball as well because of the weather, it's going to be easier to face a team like Baltimore, who you've beat 7 of the last 8 times. And Cleveland, it's been more of a split series since 2020. But even then, I mean, you're playing them late in the year. I don't know how I feel. I don't think Deshaun Watson is going to ever go back to form. So I think that overall talent-wise, I think they're better than Cleveland. The only games that I am extremely worried about are, I don't think they're beating Kansas City on Christmas. Philadelphia, I think that they can win that game. I think this is very make or break year for the Eagles in terms of like Nick Sirianni and whatnot. But the Jets on Sunday night, if Rodgers looks to form, that's not going to be easy. Dallas is kind of a toss-up to me too, because I think they got worse this offseason. Overall, I think that they have a lot of winnable games. Even with the teams that people are, throwing out as, it's not going to be an easy win. I think that they can still win the majority of these things. By the way, do the fans know me or what? Buffalo game was just Josh Allen being Jesus. Yeah, of course it was. Josh Allen can do no wrong. He is my Lord and Savior, in many ways. Rel, what day is training camp start? So it's the 25th, right?
Yeah, that'll be the first practice. They report the 24th. So
there you go.
You'll hear all the news from the pressers on the 24th. That's lovely. We'll be out there for the first day.
Lovely stuff. And we'll be out there Nick will be out there every day. I won't be out there every day, but I'll be out there a good number of days. Good stuff, buddy, all around. I'm excited to venture on the summer journey with you in Latrobe. Hopefully it's not going to be too hot. You know me, and you know how much I despise the heat, and I will complain about it. What have you we got coming on the Penn Live side of things?
Yeah, man. I got some previews coming throughout the next few days, just in terms of position battles and all that. We'll have some interviews that I'm still, kind of running through from the spring that I am thinking are pertinent towards there. So we got that. And then next week, I got an announcement. It's going to be a podcast. So be on the lookout. This guy here, whatever. Jarrett will be on at some point. I'm just dumb and I don't understand what way. That way is not you.
It's not.
That way is me. And then that guy.
That way. There we go.
I'm just dumb. And my perspective is at a camera. So
I'm excited to hear the podcast announcement. I'm excited to be on it as often as you need me to be on it. So very much looking forward to that from you. Shout out to the Berg News. Thanks for watching. Very good stuff that they do on Instagram and Twitter. So thanks for tuning in. In terms of me, like I said, go and read the piece. It's not a Steelers piece, but go and read the piece about Joe Brady and the Bills offense. I put a lot of stuff into that. So go and read it. Damn it. And then I'll be doing a piece about the Chiefs and how they can become the greatest dynasty in the history of football. And then, of course, go and read Behind the Steel Curtain, SB Nation's dedicated Steelers coverage, in which I am the deputy editor of. So go and read all of that. Pump fake wise, what's going on there? I feel like I did something. Oh, we wrapped up the all the division previews. So those are all on the channel now for each division. Did the NFC South with John Hendricks. So go and watch all of those. And then more written stuff will be coming. Some feature stuff will be coming that I'm looking forward to. And I'll get all that out. Follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL for all of it. Follow Nick Faribault on Twitter at
Faribault FB. Also, make sure to follow the Steelers Penn Live channel because we'll be posted on the stuff over there that I write.
There we go. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday to talk about pass catchers. Who will it be with? I don't know. It might be Nick. I might ask him to do it again. We'll see what happens. But whomever it will be with, subscribe to the channel. Don't think I've said that yet. make sure you subscribe. We're like 8 away from 1,200 subs. That's pretty neat, especially, it'd be like 800 subs that we've gotten since the draft. That's awesome. So subscribe to the channel. Keep up to date with everything that we're doing. Appreciate y'all tuning in. I'll see you Monday for more Black and Gold Breakdown, and then next week on more pump fake related things as well. So appreciate y'all. Have a good night.